Now that we have a good understanding of the socio-psychological tradition when it comes to group communication, let's move on to the theories in the sociocultural tradition. I am Paul, and Carrie used my voice to record the audio since her microphone was not cooperating and the female voices sounded weird. So, let's begin. As the textbook notes, the sociocultural tradition features theories that reflect the symbolic interpretive perspective. Though it also sometimes informs cybernetics, symbolic interpretive perspective deals with the many ways groups create their realities in the context of the symbols they create and utilize. The sociocultural theories in this chapter deal primarily with group structure and group tasks. Think of it this way, as any group works towards accomplishing its tasks, whatever that task may be. There are three theories in the sociocultural tradition, and in the book they are organized from general to specific. They are structuration theory, functional theory and groupthink. Structuration describes a general process by which groups create structure in the context of task completion. Functional theory looks at how effectively groups accomplish their tasks, and groupthink outlines a common problem that task-oriented groups experience. Let's begin with the most broad of the three theories. Structuration theory. Structuration theory was formulated by Anthony Giddens and his followers. Structuration is a general theory of social action. This means that when we as humans communicate with each other, we create structures. Structures are patterns of rules and norms that govern our actions. Structures can be sprawling institutions, individual relationships and everything between. The structures we create both affect and are affected by our actions. Giddens formulated what he called the duality of structure. This term was coined to describe how the structures we create guide our actions, which in turn affect those structures by creating new rules and reproducing old ones. The unintended consequences of our actions are that we create new structures that will affect our future actions. Ethnicity can be viewed as a result of structuration over time. And people acting within this structure may not even see that it affects their actions and perhaps limits their ability to act in the future. Here is a simplified example of how structuration works in small group communication with a task-related context. In the course of planning an event, member X becomes the person who handles food orders at the current event. This becomes reinforced and then she becomes the one who handles food at all future events. Anyone who has worked in small groups knows that sooner or later, you will be member X about something whether you want to be or not. Giddens outlines three major dimensions of structuration. First, there is an interpretation or understanding, which he called signification. Second, there is a sense of morality or proper conduct, which he termed legitimation, and lastly, there is a sense of power in action or domination. Of course, in the real world, our behaviors almost never are related to one simple structure. Life is much more complex than that. Two things can occur, one structure may mediate another. In other words, one structure is created by producing another structure. For example, a communication network ends up establishing who can talk to whom in a group, and how they do it, so individual and group roles are defined by the network itself. Structures also relate to each other through contradiction. Producing one structure requires the production of another structure which undermines the first structure. This paradox is common in groups who must work together to accomplish a task, but the time spent figuring out how to work together and building relationships detracts from the time spent on the actual task at hand. Marshall Scott Poole's contribution is the notion of convergence, or agreement. Poole's idea was that the process by which a group reaches convergence creates the group's social structure. And interaction within the group are made up of schemes of interpretation, that is rules and norms, the larger system in which the group must work, and the larger social system. Poole notes that outside factors always influence a group's actions, but that these factors only have meaning insofar as they are interpreted and assigned meaning by the group. An example is the type of task a group must complete, which affects the group's interactions and the set of norms which will be applied during completion of the task by the group. When it comes to interaction, group members will act towards other members according to their perceived role in the group, such as task leader or conflict manager. The actions of groups will both create tension and contradictions and resolve these same tensions and contradictions. Poole's version of the process by which groups make decisions postulates that groups follow a variety of paths when making decisions. The path a group follows depends on the contingencies which the group faces. 3 sets of variables determine how a group functions. The first are the objective task characteristics, such as the impact of the task, the clarity of the problem at hand, the kind of expertise the problem requires, etc. Then there are group task characteristics which are variable depending on the group, such as their experience with this type of problem. The third variable is group structural characteristics, including degree of cohesiveness, size and history of conflict. Poole and Roth did intensive studies of small groups and developed a sophisticated theory involving types of decision paths, activity tracks and breakpoints that impede decision-making. So, structuration theories describe group decision-making, but don't really go into detail about what makes groups effective and efficient and what prevents them from being productive or making well-informed decisions. To look at the effectiveness of groups, we turn to functional theory. The foundation of functional theory is the works of John Dewey. Functional theory emphasizes the connection between the quality of a group's communication and the quality of a group's output. Dewey's seminal work How We Think, published in 1910, forms the basis of functional group theory. Dewey formulated 6 steps in the problem-solving process: expressing a difficulty, defining the problem, analyzing the problem, suggesting solutions, comparing alternatives and testing and implementing the best solution. Randy Hirokawa further developed functional theory by focusing on identifying the various types of mistakes groups make which lead to ineffective decision-making, and suggested ways in which groups can be more effective. Hirokawa's decision-making process is similar to Dewey's and includes identification and assessment of the problem, gathering and evaluating information, generation of alternative proposals, discussion of objectives, evaluation of objectives and proposals, and reaching consensus. Thinking about the 6 steps on the previous slide, you can see where groups can go wrong, such as improper assessment of problem, inappropriate goals and objectives, improper assessment of positive and negative qualities of proposals and or objectives, inadequate information base, and faulty reasoning. Take a look at this comic to see all the ways in which groups may not function well. Hirokawa goes on to suggest functional requisites for effective decision-making. A group that embraces these requisites is more effective. This group clarifies the type of issue being addressed, seeks answers that match the type of issue at hand, generates an appropriate range of proposals, critically examines the strength and weakness of proposals, and selects most appropriate solution. Hirokawa identifies 3 obstacles that interfere with the functional requisites and how to counter them, outlined here. Time and effort-consuming issues like over-concern with intergroup relationships, poor information processing and domination of personal interests can be overcome by clarifying group interests, recognizing obstacles, managing the process thoughtfully and reviewing all decisions. He also identified 4 aspects that affect groups' decision quality. These involve understanding the problem, objectives and what constitutes a good decision in the case at hand, and then appropriate assessment of the alternatives. While functional theory focuses on what makes groups effective, the next theory examines the mistakes groups make. The last and most specific theory in the sociocultural tradition focuses on the phenomenon of groupthink. Here's a good example of groupthink. Irving Janis developed the groupthink hypothesis, which states that certain conditions lead to high group satisfaction and an effective output. This means that sometimes groups can come up with really bad decisions and appear at least to be really okay with that. Groupthink results from a high degree of cohesiveness in groups. Cohesiveness is the degree of mutual interest among a group's members. Some cohesiveness is a good thing. Mutual interest brings group members together and enhances interpersonal relationships among members which can help them work together. However, A high degree of cohesiveness means that too much of the group's energy is spent on maintaining goodwill among members and bonding rather than making effective decisions. Cohesiveness leads to overconfidence and a general lack of critical thinking. The results can be a range of negative outcomes, such as discussion being limited to few alternatives, with little or no exploration of other ideas. Maybe the initially favored and unfavored solutions are never revisited or outcomes explored. Outsiders are seen as a threat, so their opinions are not sought. The group may only gather supporting information for the favored solution and none others. And no plan B is even considered, since the self-satisfied group is sure they cannot fail. There are 8 symptoms of groupthink. The group creates an illusion of invulnerability. They cannot make a mistake. They are rife with rationalizations to explain away any problems with their solution. They are sure they are doing the right thing, having an inherent morality. They stereotype outsiders in a negative way and shut them out. A huge amount of direct pressure is put on members to conform, which leads to self-censorship that is reinforced by mind guards to keep everyone in line. The result is that the group's decisions appear unanimous. One of the most well-known examples of groupthink in the real world is the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. Scientists fell victim to groupthink when evaluating the infamous O-rings that failed after launch. The result was a national tragedy. So, what are the ways groups can combat the dangers of groupthink? Members can encourage each other to think critically, invite outsiders for fresh opinions, set up subgroups to discuss aspects of the issue apart from the main group, assign members to express opposing opinions, and reconsider decisions. One classic cinematic example is the film, 12 Angry Men. At the start of the film, a jury with no discussion has made up its mind to convict a man of murder. The sole holdout is under great pressure from the group to conform. The groupthink mentality is slowly overcome as the holdout convinces the group members to think critically, reconsider assumptions and consider all the evidence. In summary, the 3 theories in this tradition examine how groups create structure which influences future actions, the ways in which they make decisions and complete tasks, the mistakes they make and ways in which they can be more efficient in their decision-making.